For nearly half a year, hikers climbing the snowy mountain had grown familiar with a white stray dog everyone called Snowy. No one knew where she came from. Some believed she had once belonged to a family who abandoned her in the mountains, while others thought she had simply wandered there and never left. Either way, Snowy survived by greeting tourists along the trail and hoping for scraps of food from kind strangers. Despite living in such a harsh place, Snowy was incredibly gentle. Whenever someone called her name, she would happily run over with her tail wagging, allowing people to pet her soft fur. Hikers often shared bread, sausages, or bits of meat with her, and she accepted every bite gratefully. She had become something of a symbol on the mountain, a familiar companion that regular visitors looked forward to seeing. But as winter deepened, people began noticing changes in her appearance. Snowy had become thinner. Her ribs started showing beneath her white coat, and her stomach looked swollen. She no longer followed hikers all the way to the summit. Instead, she often disappeared into the forest halfway through the climb before returning hours later, looking exhausted. A woman named Clara, who frequently visited the mountain and often fed Snowy, grew increasingly worried. One afternoon, after giving the dog some water and food, she watched Snowy suddenly run downhill toward the forest once again. Curious, Clara tried following her, but the dog moved too quickly through the snowy trails and vanished among the trees. An hour later, Snowy returned alone and curled up near a rock to sleep in the sunlight. Clara couldn't stop wondering where she had gone. A few local volunteers soon joined Clara to uncover the mystery. They gently attached a small camera to Snowy's collar and waited to see where she disappeared every day. Not long after eating, Snowy headed back down the mountain. Even while clearly in a hurry, she still stopped to greet hikers who called her name. The volunteers watched the camera feed carefully as the dog crossed snowy paths and disappeared deep into the forest. Eventually, Snowy arrived at a hidden stone cave halfway down the mountain. Then something incredible happened. 4 tiny puppies suddenly rushed out of the cave toward her. The puppies looked just like their mother, fluffy and white, stumbling clumsily through the snow. They surrounded Snowy immediately, desperate for milk and warmth. Watching from the footage, the volunteers realized this exhausted stray dog had been secretly raising puppies alone in the freezing mountains. Following the trail carefully, the volunteers eventually found the cave themselves. The puppies immediately became frightened at the sight of humans and retreated deeper into the shadows, barking nervously despite their tiny size. Still, they were unbelievably adorable. To better understand the family's situation, the volunteers quietly set up small cameras near the cave entrance. Over the next several days, they observed Snowy constantly traveling back and forth between the mountain trails and her hidden shelter. Every day she climbed up hills searching for food from hikers. Every night she returned to feed her babies. She barely rested. One morning, the volunteers followed Snowy again and discovered something even more heartbreaking. After feeding the puppies in the cave, Snowy walked toward a small guest house near the base of the mountain. Beneath the wooden floor of the building, 2 more puppies were hiding. Snowy actually had 6 babies. The owner of the guest house, an elderly woman named Martha, was shocked when the volunteers showed her the puppies hidden beneath her floorboards. She admitted hearing faint crying sounds for days, but never imagined stray puppies were living there. The volunteers gently carried the 2 weaker puppies inside and fed them warm food. They were starving and ate desperately. A short while later, Snowy appeared outside the glass door. The puppies immediately ran toward her, whining excitedly. But Snowy didn't come inside. Instead, she quietly watched them for a moment before slowly turning away. The volunteers suddenly understood the painful truth. Snowy knew she could not raise all 6 puppies alone on the freezing mountain. She had secretly placed the 2 weakest puppies beneath a human home, hoping someone kind would discover them and give them a chance to survive. It wasn't abandonment. It was sacrifice. The volunteers realized they could no longer leave this little family struggling alone in the cold. The next day, they returned with a veterinarian and rescue equipment. The puppies were carefully removed from the cave one by one. When Snowy returned and found them missing, panic immediately filled her eyes. She searched frantically around the cave, crying softly into the snowy wind. But the moment she saw the volunteers holding her puppies safely, she calmed down. It was as if she understood these people had come to help. For the first time, Snowy allowed humans to place a leash around her neck without resistance. Together, the rescuers carried all 6 puppies down the mountain while Snowy walked quietly beside them. Many hikers who had known Snowy for months gathered nearby, emotional as they watched the brave mother dog finally leave the mountain behind. At the veterinary clinic, all 6 puppies were examined and found to be healthy. Despite the terrible conditions, Snowy had somehow managed to keep them alive. Snowy herself, however, was severely malnourished. Her body was exhausted, and she had developed skin problems from living in the freezing cold for so long. Still, the veterinarian assured the volunteers that with proper treatment and care, she would recover completely. News about Snowy's story spread quickly online. People everywhere were moved by the image of a stray mother dog climbing dangerous mountain trails every day just to feed her children. Soon, adoption requests began pouring in. The volunteers carefully screened families to ensure every puppy would receive a loving home. Several families even asked specifically to adopt Snowy herself after hearing about her incredible devotion. For the first time in many months, Snowy no longer needed to beg tourists for scraps of food on icy mountain paths. Now she slept peacefully in a warm shelter beside her puppies. One evening, Clara visited the rescue center and found Snowy resting quietly while her puppies played nearby. The tired sadness that once filled her eyes was finally gone. In its place was something softer. Something peaceful. After months of struggling alone in the cold, Snowy finally understood that she and her babies were safe. And maybe, for the very first time in her life, she no longer had to survive by herself.